We are about to create a C++ program that accepts the power factor of an electrical load and classifies it using a specific guide. So let's say if the power is less than 0 or greater than 1, it should print invalid power factor, and if it's between 0 to 0.5, it should print poor power factor. 0.5 to 0.8 should print fair power factor, and 0.8 to 0.95 should print good power factor. So for this, we should be using an if and else statement. So this is the C++. To start with, we need to create a new file. So we'll be using Control N. Then since it's using C++ program, we need to change the extension to CPP, which is C++. So we can do save, Control S, or we save it here. So let's just save it as trial. Let's save it as trial. Okay, now let's have saved as CPP. So first and foremost, we include a library. So let's include the input output string library. So hashtag include input output string library. This library tells the compiler to add a library. The I stands for input and the O stands for output string. This particular library allows us to use the scene, which is the input, and the cout to display output. So after including a library, we use a standard namespace. So let's use using namespace std, which is a standard namespace. The std is the standard namespace where the cin and the cout belong. In consequent codes, you will see the cin and the cout. Writing using namespace std means we don't have to be typing std and cin in every time. Without this library, we'll be typing for an input, we'll be typing something like std cout before we type a particular printout. So let's say hello. The line 2 helps us or delivers us from typing this. So let's start the main function. So integer main, int main. Bring a curly bracket. Every C++ program starts executing from the main function. Int, I pronounce that int, means the function returns an integer value. So meaning every function we'll be writing should return an integer value. So let's declare a variable. So let's say a variable factor. So let's float it to float factor. You can use int factor when you want an integer, or you can float it. The float stores decimal numbers. So let's say 0.65, 0.92, 1.00. If you want to input such numbers, we use float. Okay. So now let's ask the user for an input. So let's see. Ask the user for an input. Let's say cout. So after cout, to bring two less than signs, then bring a semicolon to enter what the user is supposed to see. So let's say enter the power factor. it with a semicolon. So the cout displays text on the screen. It tells the user what information to enter. So when you run this code, the user will see enter the power factor. So since the user has entered, since as the user sees this, is the user is supposed to enter an input. So let's save the input as factor, as like how we declare the variable. So factor. After saving an input, you also need a semicolon. So for this, meaning anytime the user enters a power factor, let's say 0.5, it will save it as factor. So now let's check if the input is valid. For this, we use an if statement. For a power factors, it should be between 0 and 1. So to check if a power factor is valid, we use the if command. So let's give a intent or situation. So let's say if the factor is less than or, this stands for or, these two vertical line stands for or. If factor is greater than 1, is greater than 1, we want it to print like if the factor is greater than 1. A factor can't be greater than 1, so meaning if a factor is greater than 1, it's invalid, or a factor is less than 0 is invalid. A factor is supposed to be between 1 and 0. So if a factor is greater than 1, or a factor is, it should print, let's say, it should print invalid factor. So you should see, the user should see invalid factor. So invalid power factor. And it's our semicolon. So anytime a user inputs a value greater than 1 or less than 0, it should print invalid power factor. So now let's go for the first statement to check for power factor. Since we have used is if, so any case which will not work or goes against the if, we use else if. So let's say else if, mean if the statement doesn't satisfy if, we should try this. Else if factor is less than or equal to 0.5. Every time the less than sign comes before the equal to sign, interchanging it causes error. So we bring our curly brackets. So see out, it should see out, poor power factor. We close it with our semicolon. We close it with our semicolon. So for this, we forgot to end this. So we have to end this. So we end it with this. Start this with end it. So meaning this is an extra one. So we continue. So now we have satisfied poor factor. So now let's check for the second, which is an or a fair power factor. So else if a factor greater than or equal to 0.51, and also so this n double n factor is less than or equal to 0.8, it should print should print it should print to see out fair power factor. This checks if the power factor is between 0.51 and 0.8. The end operator means end. So for this, both conditions must be true, and the value must be greater than or equal to 0.5 and less than or equal to 0.8. So now you have to check for good power factor. So else if factor is greater than or equal to 0.81 and factor is less than or equal to 0.95, it should see out, it should print good power factor. So end this. So we have done the good power factor. So it's left with a last condition. So when you're using if and else if, the last condition is always else without an if. So else meaning if the conditions doesn't satisfy any of the above statements, you should print excellent power factor, meaning anything above 0.95 and equal to 1 or equal to 1. So let's say excellent power factor, excellent power factor. So if none of the previous conditions are true, the only valid answers will be, let's say, 0.96, 0.97, 0.98, 0.9, and 1. So after writing the code, you return 0 as the last line. That is, you save, then you compile and run. So this, if I enter a power factor of 0.5, it should tell me it's a power factor. And if I enter a power factor of 1, it should give me an excellent power factor. Thank you.